I'm here with Daniel Vettori from the Barbados Royals. If you guys have any questions that you wish to ask, please do so. Let's have a quick look. Ryan, do you want to got a question? Do you want to go first?
Hi, yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon, Danny. My question is, as was mentioned earlier, there is a bit of a change this year in terms of the name and the branding of the Barbados franchise now being called the Royals. Last season wasn't particularly a good one in terms of where the team finished in the standings, fifth, I believe. I think just 3 victories last season. Do you believe, or is this being seen as a fresh start for this team, as a fresh brand and maybe perhaps a fresh approach to the cricket being played? And if so, what is the approach that we can expect to see, without giving, of course, away too much information?
Yeah, I think so. There's obviously a lot's happened in the last couple of months. I mean, I only came on board with the team probably in that time as well, and then obviously the change of ownership or new ownership coming in with the Royals, and obviously they have a brand with Rajasthan, and they have a long history with T20 cricket, and I think we'll see that the way that they've gone about things in IPL will definitely influence some of the things that we do, because of the sort of senior management being very similar between the two franchises. So I think it's sort of a wait and see thing from my perspective, because I haven't actually been able to meet the guys yet. I've just come in from the 100 competition and I've got a couple of days in quarantine here. So I probably can't give too much away because I don't know too much, but I know from my experiences as a coach and how I like to go about things that we obviously need to be aggressive in this format, but we also have to understand that the conditions are going to dictate a lot of what we're going to do. And as the tournament goes on, I think those conditions will change, and I think the team that has the ability to adapt with the condition will have the best chance of winning games.
I just have one more question, if I'll be permitted.
Go for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good for me.
Yeah, thanks. So Danny, as you mentioned, joining along with this team quite recently, but you do have a decorated career behind you and a lot of experience coming in from that. What are some of the things you as coach can bring to the table that could perhaps help Barbados Royals perform much better this time around?
Well, I probably touched on it just a little bit just then, around the ability to adapt and the ability to understand conditions and see what's right at a point in time. And I don't always like it when teams, I suppose, have a brand or a style of player. I like teams that actually can read conditions and understand what they need to do at certain times. So hopefully that's what I can bring to the table. Getting to know Jason over the last little while and understanding how he wants to work, and hopefully from me, I've always enjoyed working with spinners, and that's my, I suppose, my forte and how I've helped players in the past. So looking forward to working with Hayden Walsh. We've got Ashley Nurse here, obviously who's an experienced T20 bowler. Glenn Phillips has bowled in the past, and trying to develop those guys. So I think that's what you can see from, I suppose, my teams in the past, that they do rely heavily on spinners, and hopefully we can bring the best out of them.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Ian, you had a question?
Yes, good afternoon. And with the addition of Ocean Thomas in the Barbados team, when he first came in and he was with Talawals, he had a bright career, but he didn't have a best couple of seasons in the CPL. How is he looking now, and how big of a role does Ocean Thomas have with Barbados?
Well, I think that's been one of the pleasing things since I only arrived yesterday, but the conversations amongst our assistant coaches has been that Ocean Thomas looks fantastic, and he's a big part of our team. We obviously need his bowling, and I think once again in these conditions with his pace and his height, I think once the wickets start to deteriorate and change a little bit, I think he's the sort of bowler who could be more and more effective. So we are obviously hoping to see him at his best, and so far so good in terms of that positive news around that.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. So Romario's asked a question saying, what do you think of the strength of the Royals team this year? And it's difficult for you to say who you've been impressed with so far. Obviously, you mentioned O'Shane, but, what's your thoughts on the squad in general? I suppose a better question, bearing in mind that you've not got out of in-room quarantine as yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting team on paper. I think it was 2 years ago that Barbados won the CPL. So I think there's still some good feelings from those days. Obviously, Jason Holder's record speaks for itself. I'm excited to work with him, and hopefully he's the sort of guy that can actually lead the team, batting, bowling, fielding, captaincy. I mean, that's a big part of his game, and that's why he's been so successful. I think there's going to be some players that potentially CPL hasn't seen a lot of, in terms of a Smit Patel who's come in, who once again the assistant coaches speak so highly of him. Azam Khan, who I think is a fantastic player of spin. We've got Jake Lintott coming over, who's recently been successful in the 100 competition, and I think everyone knows Glenn Phillips and what he's done in the CPL. So I think from an overseas perspective, we stand in pretty good stead. But like all tournaments, I think it's the domestic players that can lead you to victory. And if you see that around the world, when you have a strong domestic core, it makes such a big difference. So I think the likes of Johnson Charles at the top of the order, so experienced. What we can get out of Kyle Mayers and Show Hope will be crucial. And I've already mentioned Hayden Walsh and how well he did in that Australian series, and how well he's done for a couple of years now. And I've loved watching him bowl. So I think we have a lot of the things required to do, or the players required to be successful in T20 competition.
Next question asks about Glenn Phillips, who you just briefly touched on. Obviously a relatively late addition to the squad, but obviously he's impressed with the Tallawahs and with New Zealand. You know, is he a big part of your plans, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, of course. I think from a batting perspective that we've seen, he's a guy who can adapt to Caribbean conditions, and sometimes the wickets can be tough on batters, but by all accounts, he's been so successful over here, and I think in that regards, we're lucky to have him. I think you see what the energy he brings in the field, and he can actually make a difference in the field, which you can't say about every player. The thing that we're going to try and tap into a lot more with him is his bowling. And he started to bowl a bit more for New Zealand, and they see him as an option. And once again, once the conditions start to really suit spin bowlers, I think we can see Glenn Phillips as a total cricketer, and that's such a unique thing. And in this day and age, where you can contribute extensively in all three formats, all three disciplines. Sorry.
Jermaine, you had a question?
Hi, Daniel. Good afternoon.
Hi.
The question is twofold. One, I think you would have had some experience of playing at Warner Park, probably in your CPL career and internationally. There's this perspective of Warner Park. How do you craft into the batsman's mind, or what's the mindset for you as a coach of the franchise, that it's not all about clearing the fences? Because we know Warner Park is one of the smallest grounds in the world, and a lot of batsmen get lured into just playing that shot of just clearing the fence here at Warner Park.
It's a really good point. I think there are a number of factors that play into that. It's the surface, and also that prevailing wind that can sometimes play a huge part. I think there are pockets of the ground that still have enough size that a bowler can defend against a batsman. It's just how straight it is obviously very tempting. And I suppose my experiences of playing in New Zealand conditions with grounds that are simply are very similar in their sizes. Hopefully I can bring that to the table. But I think we as a batting unit have to understand that what the appropriate score is on any given day. And I've mentioned it a couple of times already, because there's going to be an extensive amount of games on 2 to 3 pitches, then the scoring is going to probably reduce as the tournament goes on. So our understanding of what a good score is, I think, is our starting point. And we've seen that in competitions around the world, that the teams that work that out the quickest and adapt generally have the most success.
And the second part to that question has to do specifically from the bowler's perspective. I know you started mentioning there just now about that, but how do you get in the bowler's minds also of bowling in those correct channels, areas, because again, the ground is small? And who would you say would be that one bowler that the franchise can look at, you know, in terms of the marquee bowler on a ground like Warner Park?
Well, I think once again, it does depend on conditions, but I think the way that I like to work is get into I suppose, a routine with a bowler of him understanding what his best defensive ball is and what his best attacking ball is, and that those balls are unique to him, and the skill as a coach and I suppose as a player is when is the appropriate time to use them. And I think that's a lot of the conversations we'll start to have. And we have got experienced bowlers and like Mohamed Amir, Sarah Pereira, who obviously they know these conditions, and then the likes of I think an O'Shane Thomas up front can be so effective once again in these conditions. So I would like to think it's a collective as a bowling unit, but we know that there's certain players are going to have good days, and I hope that those good days are down to planning around their own strengths and understanding when's the appropriate time to use them.
Romario, I think Dan has already basically covered off what you said about the one venue thing in his comments. So I'll move on to Visham's question, which is about Amir Pereira and of course Jake Lintott, who you would have seen up close, although for the opposition in the final of the 100, and what you think they bring to the team is the question he's asking.
Well, I mean, it's pretty easy with Amir and Pereira because they're so experienced and they understand T20 cricket and they understand what it means to be successful in franchise cricket. So I think those guys just slot into any team they play for, and people respect them because of what they've done in the past. And I think that's going to be very similar to here, that they just know what they're doing, and that's quite. It's something that can't be underestimated, particularly from a coaching staff, that you can throw the ball to a Mohamed Amir and he's basically been in every situation there is in T20 cricket. So that's a real skill set that we're lucky to have. I think Jake Lintott's obviously the player that not many would have seen. He's probably sort of been a little bit of a journeyman, I suppose, around English cricket, and he's finally settled with Warwickshire, and then he was picked up in the wildcard draft for the 100 and had such a successful season with the Southern Brave, and I think he was leading wicket taker for them. So his skill set has been able to manipulate his pace and also manipulate his length, depending on the batsman. You saw that in the final against one of the best players of spin in Moeen Ali, that he was able to get him out through that change of length, change of pace. So it's not always easy as a left arm wrist spinner. It's a tough art form, but from what I've seen so far, he has a lot of control. He has an exceptionally good googly, and it looks like even the best batsmen in the world struggle to pick it up.
And then Visham again has asked just to kind of go back to O'Shane Thomas in terms of getting the best out of him. I suppose kind of the question he's asking is, what can you do in 3 weeks? Is it more just trying to, kind of bring the best out of him for your team at the time? I don't suppose there's much opportunity, is there, to do anything long term with O'Shane? But I suppose a talent you're maybe excited to be working with.
Yeah, and I think I covered off before the fact that he's been so impressive in this initial parts of the camp. The other coaches have been really impressed with him. So I think that's the starting point, that he's coming to camp ready to go. And I suppose it's difficult to answer until the games get going. But we have high hopes for his season this year.
That's the last of the questions that have been put in the chat for me. So I think we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you very much for your time, Daniel. All the best for the Royals this season. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.